Hey!
This is JJ and Alex.
I made a name for myself, I told you I won't be denied.
As you wrap up your day, it's time to get your fix of the teams you live for and the sports you love. This is JJ and Alex, presented by G2G Bars on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Hey, everybody, welcome on in. It is JJ and Alex, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. Alex, Kirry, Mitch Harper sitting in for JJ, who's out today. And anytime I can get Mitch to hang out with me on an extra day of football, I felt like this is a good way for us to wean off of the Big 12 program, too. Like, we've just been doing first and 12 all year and breaking down all the Big 12. We got a Big 12 championship game tomorrow to jump into, and that's not even close to the big news of all the things that have happened today. And if you thought that we were not going to have to intersect with Bronco Mendenhall the rest of our lives, you were sorely mistaken.
It's a good day for me to hop on because you got two BYU men, now being now hired here at in-state programs. So it's going to be a loaded show today. Excited to be with you, Alex, and big hirings for both Utah State and Utah today.
Well, it's going to be It's going to be a weird one to try to figure out how they're going to balance that out too, with how Utah is going to figure out what a running back and quarterback upgrade may end up being for them if they do end up bringing a couple of people along. I love how it's like, will you show up? It's just as important to bring a guy on to bring the guys that he can have play for him on, and Jason, Beck, and Bronco are going to have to split ways for a minute. And, one goes to Utah, one goes to Utah State, one is the OC, one is the head coach. So lots going on here. We are at the Doug Smith Mitsubishi here in American Fork. We've done this a few Fridays over the past 6 or 7 weeks or so. And every time we walk in, Chris Smith he sandwiches cars between us. And I think he knows that I would want personally. I think that's kind of his move, is to be like, hey, look how sharp this is. But the Mitsubishi brand is blowing up. Ever since we've been in here, we've been. I don't know if I get a commission off of this because we've been pushing these Outlanders out. Basically, the lease sells itself because they're $398 down and $398 a month for like a $50,000 car.
This blacked out one's awesome.
It's pretty dope. So come down, hang out with us, and Cheyenne put some candy out to really get the chubby guys in, and we're gonna keep this thing rolling here the rest of the day. All day, it's been this news across the state of Utah with Bronco Mendenhall, with the hire at Utah State, and of course Jason Beck and the hire there at Utah State. Let's kick things off here with the cut. Our program brought to you by G2G Bars, all natural ingredients and no preservatives. Make the G2G Bar perfect for anybody who needs that quick, tasty, and nutritious boost. So let's kick things off right here and jump in. Let's do it.
It's time for the biggest story of the day. This is what made the cut with JJ and Alex on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
And, of course, the cut this hour brought to you by Trajan Wealth, TRAJAN Wealth.com for all your trusted local financial fiduciary needs. You just go to their website, TrajanWealth.com, TRAJAN Wealth.com. Let's start off first. I don't know. Let's toss a coin here. Let's jump in and start talking about Jason Beck first, the new offensive coordinator hire at Utah. I think the reason that this is such a big deal, too, I mean, you had a couple things. And it's always hard, Mitch, because when you have a couple of names that get thrown out there and neither of those guys get hired, and then you end up with another guy. But I don't think you could do it as I don't know. I think you have New Mexico, who is a historically bad team that Bronco and his guys took over for 1 year. Well, I say historically. Over the past, 6 or 7 years, they've been in a real bad spot. And I think they were 1-11 last year. And Bronco rolls in and does what Bronco does, which is immediately change the culture. There's some real Diana Sabo, I heard her come on with Hanson Scotty, and she's like, well, first let's acknowledge that there's a team out there who's hurting because there's a guy who was like, I'm here. And some guy tweeted out, too, and he goes, Bronco Mendenhall, all those fake tears, those BS tears that he fed us, and now he's going somewhere else. I think everybody who knows Bronco and knows what he's done and kind of the things he's pulled off knows that Utah State feels like a better fit, not just because he's from the state of Utah, not just because his parents, lived out here and everything. It's not just that. It's that it just has that feel and that fit to it where if there's going to be a place he's going to end his career, by the way, a 6-year deal, and we just saw the numbers. Did you see the numbers too? Just over $13 million over those 6 years. That's a crazy number, and it's a number that Utah State has never even been close to throwing out there. But with Jason Beck, he comes in and could possibly bring a running back with him, could possibly bring a quarterback with him, and that's exactly what Utah needed, all three of those things.
Yeah, Jason Beck is a big-time hire for Utah. And, Jason Beck had the number 4 offense in college football this year at New Mexico. And New Mexico, since about 2007, 2009, remember when Mike Loxley was the head coach, they've been a mess for 15 years, and Bronco and Jason Beck brought them to respectability. And Devin Dampier, the quarterback for New Mexico, he was the quarterback offensive player of the year in the Mountain West Conference. Jason Beck just produces great QBs. And I think that's the theme that, from his time at BYU when he was the QB coach at BYU from 2013 to 15, he had Taysom Hill, Christian Stewart, and Tanner Mangum. And he inherited Taysom Hill when Taysom Hill was basically at square one of becoming a quarterback, where he was going 6 of 18 against Utah in 2013. And then fast forward to 2015 against Nebraska, Taysom Hill looked like one of the best quarterbacks in college football until he suffered that Achilles injury in 2015. And a lot of that credit goes to, one, Taysom's an incredible athlete, but Jason Beck and the development of QBs. And then you look at Virginia, Kurt Benkert, who went on to be an NFL quarterback, Bryce Perkins. He just produces quality, high-level quarterbacks. Jason Beck's a promising rising star, I think, in the coaching ranks. He's the type of coach that one day could be a head coach at a power conference level. I think it's a really good fit. I think it's a much better fit than some of the other candidates that were tossed out for Utah's OC search. I think this one fits a lot better. He can hit the ground running from a recruiting standpoint, too, in the state of Utah. So I think this is a win for Utah by getting Jason Beck as the OC.
I think that a lot of what I was going to say about New Mexico's offense, I don't think anybody pictured them having the 4th best offense in the country this year. And I know you go 5-7, and so it's kind of, you don't look at it and go, they changed the entirety of that plan. It was always a little bit weird when you'd see a Bronco Mendenhall team whose offense was clearly head and shoulders above the defense. Obviously, if he would have had a little bit more time there, that's kind of where his signature's at. But 4th ranked offense in the country, when you talk about the teams that they were behind, Miami, North Texas, Ole Miss. I mean, these are I don't know much about North Texas, and I think North Texas is in that same kind of vein where it's like, score a lot of points, but not necessarily win a lot of games. But 250 yards on the ground is a big deal, because that's the part where I think Utah fans should be licking their chops, because you've got a quarterback who was able to – the run game was phenomenal. And, again, I don't know if they're going to bring their running back and their quarterback. I don't want to tell people that that's probably going to happen, because, Jed Fish last year, remember he went to Washington. Everybody goes, Ted McMillan and Noah Fafita are going to follow him, and no can do. They felt like they were slighted, like, you lied to us or whatever. But I don't know what that's going to end up looking like for Jason Beck, but I do know that if they were to bring that over, the Utah offense, I think, and whatever Kyle Whittingham has established himself, like, he's a run-first guy, and so he probably looks and goes, I can still have my brand on there and still put 500+ yards on the field. I mean, that's what they did last year. They'd throw for 240 and they'd run for 250. And so, again, the balance part that Kyle Whittingham loves. When I say balance, their quarterback at New Mexico had a 1,200-yard rushing season. Their running back, Elijah Sanders, had an 1,150-yard rushing season as well. So you put 2,400 yards on the ground between those two guys, and you've got yourself kind of what the base of what Kyle Whittingham does. I know that I was kind of preaching, like, just spread it all out and get something crazy going and totally go outside of what you used to do. You need to think a little bit differently. But why not just do it with somebody who is exceptional at it and can pull it off and can still live inside that what Kyle Whittingham wants to do, run the ball, establish the ground game. And, to me, I look at it and go, that's a massive win if you're able to pull him in. The question is, now what does Kyle Whittingham do? Because the hire gets made, and when I say Kyle Whittingham, because they talked about how much – Morgan Scalley was going to be involved in this decision-making. Like, maybe even he's the guy who needed to totally sign off on it. Because after that happened, and they wanted to get it done before signing day, the early signing day, and the transfer portal is going to get really aggressive, starting on Monday, right? You're going to start seeing a lot of names, and you wonder what that's going to look like. You wonder how that's going to affect Utah's roster. Everybody's got to adjust to this 105-man roster thing as well. I don't even know how teams – this is something brand new for us. What's it going to look like on Monday when everything rolls out? Are teams going to be basically kicking guys off of the roster on top of the fact that you're going to get guys leaving just by attrition anyway and it's not working out from a personality standpoint or whatever, and then guys coming in? How is this 105 going to affect this brand new coaching staff, not just at Utah but everywhere?
I think there's a pretty clear vision of what direction these teams are going to go. Exit meetings have already been taking place. For Utah, it was already happening the week of the Iowa State game where they were figuring out future decisions for 2025 and beyond. So I would expect that you're going to see a lot of those guys that maybe names you've never heard of as a casual fan that probably enter the portal because there's not going to be a spot for these guys. So it's going to be interesting to see how this roster construction kind of goes for Utah and for all these teams around college football with the 105-man roster. But I think, Jason, back to your point about the identity of Utah's offense, I do think that it's good to have something not completely radical because Utah still to its core has to be a team built on a physical, violent running game, and that was missing for a lot. I mean, Mekhi Bernard did a nice job. He was solid. But, Utah's got to have elite running back play in the Big 12 to get back in the hierarchy of this conference. And, I think that Jason Beck can bring that balance that, if Kyle Whittingham continues to be the head coach that he wants in the offenses. But it'll be interesting, too, to see how, Jason Beck, what autonomy he's given to assemble the staff that he wants and the coaches that he wants on the staff, because there's a lot of long-tenured coaches on Utah's offensive staff. How much autonomy does he have to really build the staff in his own vision and what he feels can put him in the best position to succeed going forward?
If you are a Utah fan today, and obviously it's a better situation than Mike Bajakian, and that's not a huge diss on Mike Bajakian. I'm not trying to say that he definitely wasn't the guy, though, and he is a little bit like, Nate Dreiling in that sense, too, for Utah State, where it's a guy who, and I think Nate Dreiling more so, where he has a ton of potential. It just wasn't, the timing isn't there, right? Yeah. And so for Mike Bajakian, obviously it wasn't working out there. My question is what do you do, and what does Jason Beck do with the Isaac Wilson situation? Because is that something that would that be attractive for them too? Do you think that was a big part of this hire where they go, look, Jason, you develop quarterbacks. We have this 4-star guy, and he's got some bad scars that we gave him this year. I mean, the reality is, and it was part of what the injury situation was. If you want to say that Utah handled it poorly, fine, but the reality was it was just what it was, and he was not QB2. He really didn't feel like it, certainly during that part of, at a certain point of the year where you're going – and then he's going to have the injury on top of it that again, he's going to have to work through it. They said that he's probably going to be ready for spring ball. But what does the future of Isaac Wilson look like? Because even if they bring in a guy, do you think that it's more likely that they go, hey, Isaac, let's get that red shirt under your belt and let's keep this thing going here? Is it going to be a priority for them to make sure that they keep him?
Absolutely. I mean, you need to have Isaac Wilson. I think that he's still got tons of talent and tons of ability. I think what's concerning a little bit about Isaac Wilson is that everyone besides him had stretches of success. But there were moments, too, for Isaac, even against Utah State and Logan, where he was throwing the ball nicely. I just think that, Isaac Wilson's got a ton of potential, and I think he's got a lot of ability. If you're Jason Beck today, now that it's official, you got to hit the ground running and really establish that quarterback unit and figure out what that's going to be, because when the winter semester hits and you're in class in January, you got to know who your guys are at the quarterback spot. You ideally don't want to be piecing more guys in come April and May post-spring. You want to have all your ducks in a row at that quarterback position, whether it's Cam Rising, Isaac Wilson. You got to figure all of that out. But I think Isaac Wilson needs to be a top priority because I think, you invested a lot of recruiting capital into him. 4-star prospect, a lot of hours were spent, and I think that he's got a lot of ability still. And I think that you can't base it just solely on a freshman year. And I think Jason Beck's the right guy to turn it around for him. I think that Isaac Wilson would do a really nice job with Jason Beck. Again, Jason Beck just has a great track record with quarterback development. I think that's what Utah needs more than ever. They got to have that strong running game, as I noted, but they've got to actually become a factory of quarterback play at a high level if you want to get back to winning conference titles, because we saw it this year. I mean, you're looking at the Big 12 championship game. Sam Leavitt, very solid. ASU folks feel like he's the next Jake Plummer down there in Tempe, and Bronco Beck he's had his moments where he struggled recently, but by all accounts, his 2 years in Ames, very good football player, and it's got Iowa State having a historic season. So you've got to have great quarterback play, and Utah's got to figure that out, and Jason Beck's the perfect guy to do that.
If you look at Devin Dampier, who's the quarterback there in New Mexico, and he's jumped in the transfer portal, and a lot of people thinking that Elijah Sanders is going to be the kid who's going to come as well. The running back room is going to be interesting to handle, I think, for Utah, because who does Jason Beck bring with him on his staff? And does Quinton Ganther have a spot in that future? Because really, if you look at it, that running back room situation was absolutely abysmal for Utah this year.
It's underperformed.
Not just underperformed. Like it was like you had all this potential and you have all this list of guys, and I think that we thought, well, they're going to have 3 dudes who are going to be able to contribute. I mean, they're going to have to share the ball so much. You want to have that bell cow back, and you had that with Mekhi Bernard by default, right? He gets a 1,000-yard rushing season on an offense that was really one of the worst that we've seen out of Utah in a long, long, long time. Yeah. And so when you look at what Utah is going to do, when you look at that running back room, and when you look at what they're going to be asking, I wonder if a lot of those changes on the offensive side of the football are going to be coming. And I wonder if, think about how long Jim Harding's been there at Utah. I can't imagine he would be leaving it all, because he's been developing a lot of really, really good offensive linemen over the years. But does Quinton Ganther stay? How does the entirety of that staff shift around? And is Devin Dampier, if he ends up transferring in, is he just automatically the guy? Like, do you just look at him and go, that's going to be our situation? Or do you have a quarterback battle? What do you want to do if you're Utah?
I don't think Jason Beck is attached to any, just guys solely for New Mexico. I mean, he's been moving around quite a bit in coaching. Syracuse, everywhere he's been, he's had success in all these different spots.
With whomever he's got.
Yeah, so I don't think he's – and Utah's still a Power 4 program, in that they don't have to be completely attached to New Mexico's roster. New Mexico had a high prolific offense, but they also defensively that offense was forced to, like, they had to score 40 points a game in order to win any sort of games. But I think that Jason Beck can have success with a lot of guys, because I think that Utah should be a place that in the portal should be pretty attractive. And I think Jason Beck's the type of guy. He's a good recruiter too. I think that you can kind of open things up. But yeah, if you want to have that kind of instant assurance that maybe if the running back wants to come into Utah and be part of it, then I think that's fine. But it'll be interesting to see what the running back unit does end up looking like. I thought Anthony Woods last year at this time was someone I thought was going to be a big contributor. He got banged up, the Idaho transfer. He's a junior. We'll see what happens with him, of course. But a lot of players, but no one emerged aside, for the future that makes you say he's going to be the clear-cut number 1 in 2025 and beyond. So that's another big question, too. I mean, that whole backfield for Utah's offense, they need answers in a hurry. And but getting Jason Beck was a nice step in the right direction for Utah, and I think he's the right fit. I really do. I think that's going to be a really good coach who's got a head coaching potential to be one day a power conference coach, in my opinion.
All right. So of all these moves and things that have happened today, the Bronco Mendenhall hire up at Utah State might be the biggest home run for teams who have landed some guys. I know that from a big program perspective, Utah was that massive priority, and now what the future of Kyle Whittingham looks like, I don't know. I don't get the vibe like this that he's going to be done. Maybe this is the thing that a hire like this makes it go, you know what, this is going to feel a lot better to come back to and see that we can hit the ground running. And the more that I think about it, and the more that I wonder, okay, what's the decision that Kyle Whittingham's going to end up making? Because now that this hire's made, we're going to sit around and go, when's that press conference going to hit? Or when's he going to say something?
It needs to be soon, because if he does move on, you get that transfer portal window extended. So you want to just get it done now as soon as possible. And with the signing day window closing tonight, those recruits for 2025, they're locked in. So it's time to just make the decision and move forward.
All right. So Bronco gets hired up at Utah State, and New Mexico gets a guy for 1 year. Why is this such a better fit at Utah State for Bronco? We'll get in a lot more to it here. I know I'm kind of asking you at the very end of the segment here. And by the way, coming up in just a couple minutes, we're going to have for you Sean Reider, who's the Albuquerque Journal, from the Albuquerque Journal, who covers the New Mexico Lobos. And there's some hard feelings right now in New Mexico. I want to see what Sean's feelings are because they lost their OC, they lost their head coach, and they're seeing a lot of guys jump into that transfer portal. But that Bronco Mendenhall hire up at Utah State, it just feels like it'd be so much of a better fit for him there long term.
Better conference and better path to the playoff and better resources at Utah State than New Mexico. And then New Mexico's AD that hired Bronco moved on in August to Houston. And so you had a new boss at New Mexico, and New Mexico, I think Bronco did all he could, honestly. I mean, in 1 year, he gets them to 5 wins, and I think that really is kind of the ceiling. Yeah, maybe he could have broke through and got, some 7-win seasons, but, the days of Rocky Long making them a contender, I think those have passed. I mean, they could have been really competitive in the Mountain West, but this is going to be a very watered-down Mountain West going forward. It's not a good league. It's a little bit.
Are you saying UTEP's not going to be a power in that conference
No,
yet?
It's going to be a little bit above Conference USA, whereas when people said, why is this move happening where you're separating like the Pac-12 teams, Utah State, the Boise's, they're moving on from kind of the dead weight in the Mountain West.
Yeah.
This is going to be a really kind of a group of 6 league on steroids a little bit, where it's going to be a very competitive 7-8 teams, and I think whoever emerges from that league is probably going to go to the playoff. You've seen in college football this year, the group of 5 is a little bit watered down. There's a handful of teams. I think the best teams are going to reside in the Pac-12, and I think Bronco's very excited at the possibility of having an improved playoff access by being in the Pac-12 and financial commitments from Utah State. It's a much better fit than New Mexico.
You and I have covered Bronco Mendenhall before. The beginning of my career was covering a lot of those Bronco Mendenhall teams, and from a perspective of somebody who followed Bronco quite closely, went to all those press conferences on Monday mornings there at the Student Athlete Building at BYU for a handful of years before he ended up going out, and that transition from Croton to Bronco. He immediately made an impact, not just from the wins and losses perspective, because Croton fired up a losing program at BYU. That's essentially what he did, is he built a losing program. That Bronco came in immediately and went 11 seasons in a row and took BYU to bowl games. And say what you will about Bronco, he's not the easiest personality to work with face-to-face, but I'll tell you what he is. He shows up to every freaking program and wins.
He does, and he gets a roster that no matter what their backgrounds, they are all in for that guy. And when they buy in and they're committed to him, they will do anything. And you saw it with New Mexico. I mean, he inherited a roster that was probably one of the worst in the Mountain West, and to get them to 5-7 was quite the accomplishment.
Yeah.
So I think that Bronco will have. I think what will be great for Utah State is he's going to have consistency with Utah State. They've proven they can be, every 4 or 5 years have a 10-11 win season, but they never maintain consistency. Bronco will get them to a consistent threshold of 7 to 8 wins, and then it becomes, can you be the team that breaks through and gets that playoff year? And I think that's going to be the challenge for Bronco, but he'll make them a consistent tough out in the Pac-12.
That's crazy to sound.
Yeah.
Like, who would have
20 years ago when Bronco got hired to BYU, say 2 decades from now, he's going to be coaching in the Pac-12
for
up
Utah
in Logan,
State. Yeah,
Utah State.
Well, even just a year ago, like a year and a half ago. I mean, like we would have been like, what was that statement you just said? When Bronco Mendenhall comes back to a Pac-12 power at Utah State, like our lives have just been turned upside down over the past couple of years in college football. Realignment is insane. All right,
stay with us. 97.5 The KSL Sports Zone.
When TV and radio collide.
Love it.
Wow. This is what you get. You're listening to JJ and Alex, presented by G2G Bars.
Don't touch that dial.
On 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
All right, welcome back, everybody. It is JJ and Alex, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. Mitch Harper, our BYU insider for KSLSports.com, joining me today in place of JJ, who's out. So, it's a great day for Mitch to join us because of all the news that's been moving around. And Bronco Mendenhall was, of course, a guy that we've covered extensively when he was at BYU here. And even when he went on to Virginia, one of the weirdest days in my career was that 2015 Royal Purple Las Vegas Bowl, the day that Bronco was no longer going to be the coach at BYU, and then they announced in the press box
at Sam Boyd
Stadium the arrival of Kalani Sitake as the new head coach, and it was just a whole weird situation on top of the game being one of the weirdest things you could be a part of too. But the journey of Bronco Mendenhall to Virginia, the quick exit from Virginia, the shock exit really at the moment that he did it, getting hired by New Mexico this last year, and then now today being hired officially at Utah State, bringing him back to his home state. Joining us right now on the program, Sean Reider. He covers the New Mexico Lobos for the Albuquerque Journal. Sean, thanks for being with us today. A weird day for the folks down there in New Mexico.
Guys, thanks for having me on, and I can confirm a weird couple days for all of us down in Albuquerque.
So what we started to kind of hear the rumblings and things, and we thought, Bronco's name's being thrown out there. And as soon as Jay Hill, the defensive coordinator at BYU, had taken his name out, I think that if you were to really kind of put it on there, we all saw the Bronco Mendenhall thing kind of happening in slow motion. How long ago was it that you guys started to hear the rumblings that it might be a possibility? Because, word travels fast on this kind of stuff.
Yeah, the rumblings were about a little over a week ago, and you're kind of looking around and trying to see, legitimate reports and all that too, because once the rumblings get out, a ton of people are just like tweeting about it and posting about it. And, in that case, if there's smoke, there's not always fire. But we kind of came to the realization that there was going to be some fire, and, it ended up all kind of popping out this week. On Tuesday for his press conference, he was asked about the, did he have, any interest in the job? Was he entertaining the Utah State offer? And he kind of gave a rambling answer that didn't really answer the question. At the end of the press conference, I went back to him and I said, hey, to be clear, though, have you been contacted by Utah State? And he said, I've only been speculated to have been contacted by Utah State. And at the time, he told us he had not been approached or interviewed. Now, semantics-wise, with his representation, he probably wasn't lying and all that, too. But at the same time, for fans to kind of see that be said in a press conference, and then 2 days later for him to leave for Utah State, in fact, it's a crushing blow for fans in particular.
Sean, do you think there's anything that New Mexico could have done to keep Bronco? Do you think?
I don't have a lot of the info on that right now, to be honest with you. I do know that Fernando Lobo, the new AD here, they did try and make an aggressive offer. They were putting things back and forth to really try and, put things in place to, get things to where he wanted to in particular. But you do read that Utah State press release. You kind of see what he said about, the family element of all that, of being back in Utah. It is his home. You can't deny that. And, he's got I know his mother is still in Alpine and all that too. And that's a short drive from, not short, but relatively short drive from Logan and all that too. His sons are out there as well, and once again, it's home for him. So I'm not sure if there's anything New Mexico could have done, but I think fans in particular would like to think that there's something that could have been done.
What was the thing that Bronco did this year? I mean, for as much as we know who Bronco is here, and you just don't necessarily, all the teams that we follow here, we didn't follow super closely New Mexico all season long. I think a lot of folks obviously watched that in New Mexico and Utah State game up here in Logan when it happened. And a lot of his former players, of course, are a lot of our colleagues and a lot of time that we've covered him. But what was it about Bronco that he did in just that 1 year in New Mexico was impressive that you watched him do and watch he and his staff kind of just build up in just one season?
Oh, yeah. I mean, coaches always talk about, building the culture of the program and all that, too. I've never seen a coach in a single year overhaul the culture like that. And I know you guys are familiar with it. You saw it at BYU and then that kind of replica at Virginia and a replica by extent at New Mexico and all that, too. But it was really impressive, the level of, of consistent messaging and how the players, adopted it and how it just all kind of kept coming down. One of the more impressive jobs I've ever seen. It didn't quite take them to a bowl, but, I mean, they got really close. And, I don't think the Mendenhall era will be remembered all too fondly by a lot of fans, but I think a lot of fans around the field after they beat Washington State they're going to remember that night forever.
A lot of these in-state programs here in Utah have connections to New Mexico today. Jason Beck, former New Mexico OC, goes to Utah. What can you say about this New Mexico offense in 2024 that put up huge numbers? Just maybe the scheme, what you saw, and how this thing became one of the nation's best this year.
Yeah, one of the more unique run schemes I've ever been around, if not the most unique. Really, really impressive and really fun to watch in that regard. I think the thing that stands out to me the most And this isn't quite a scheme thing. If you think back to that Utah State game, they lost Javen Jacobs, who was one of their key running backs, to injury. They lost Nikari Rogers to injury as well. He was kind of their power back. And they had to lean on Devin Dampier, and they had to lean on Eli Sanders in the run game. And it was fascinating in a lot of ways to see, Beck kind of put that plan together in real time and, lead them back to a comeback. And that wasn't an amazing Utah State defense, but that was a relatively depleted, New Mexico offense in the sense that how do you pivot mid-game? And they figured out a way to do it. It's a really explosive offense when he has the right players. Even when he doesn't have the right players, and I kind of think back to what he did at Syracuse, they found a way to make it work. I think back to the Syracuse Pitt game when they played tight end Dan Villari at quarterback and just ran the ball a million times and ended up beating them. It's really unique. It's fitted to the personnel that they have, and I think it elevates guys that have already been around. And I think if you're a Utah fan, you should be heartened by that. To me, one of the most impressive things they did this year with the offense, maybe the most impressive, was they took an offensive line that had never played together, all transfers, all guys from different backgrounds, and it turned into one of the best in the league. That's pretty incredible coaching, if you ask me.
If you were to guess, make a couple of speculations here about some of the guys who might end up coming up from a player's perspective with Bronco up to Utah State or with Jason Beck to Utah. I think that people see the transfer portal stuff and they go, okay, Devin Dampier, he's gonna go to Utah. But is it really that easily kind of cut and dry, or do you think it's more? What do you think the numbers are going to be in terms of guys who are going to follow both Bronco and Jason Beck to their respective schools?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it kind of depends on how it plays out with the rest of the staff there at Utah State as well. I would certainly expect some guys from New Mexico to end up at Utah State, and I would probably expect a couple guys. I don't know how that many, but at least a couple to end up at Utah as well. As for specifics, I couldn't speak to any of them right now in confidence, but I would expect that kind of to play out on both sides.
Do you see any of the coaches from Broncos staff in New Mexico being candidates for the vacant New Mexico head coach job, like a Nick Howell potentially? I mean, I know defensively they struggled this year, but could any of his coaches be in the mix for that head coach vacancy now?
Yeah, I think if more guys were staying, maybe. I think the kind of key there was, if Dampier was staying, that would be kind of a point for people to build on. But I think that ship has kind of sailed at this point.
Sean Reider, Albuquerque Journal, covering the New Mexico Lobos, and very interesting day across the world of college football, as is the entirety of the off season. When we start to get into teams who are not still competing for that college football playoff or for conference championships, everything turns to who you're going to recruit, where you're going to find those next guys. And Bronco Mendenhall goes to Utah State from New Mexico. Jason Beck has also now left for Utah, and it's a wild time. I mean, you see what all these teams are doing, and you see what these leagues are becoming now. It's all changing. So, Sean, we appreciate your time, man. Thanks for being with us, and we'll keep an eye on what's going on with all these guys shifting around here.
Thanks, Sean.
Guys, appreciate you having me on. I'll see you at Specs.
There you go. That's awkward, right? I mean, he does a good job. He does a good job.
That's a good breakdown.
Look, it was a good breakdown. But, man, I'm telling you, the fan base there in New Mexico, you thought they were low last year. Like, this is as low as it gets because you had all this hope, and then it just gets torn right back down again. And then a bunch of guys leave.
The thing is, though, is that you could win that league. I mean, going forward in 2026, I mean, who's your hurdle? UNLV? Wyoming? Like the Mountain West, I mean, you can win a conference title. New Mexico hasn't done that since, Francione, 1998, the WAC? Like, it's been a minute. The WAC? The WAC? It's been a long time. So, I mean, that's, I think, the saving grace for whoever they end up getting in their head coaching search is that you could step in, and that's a winnable league. Now, New Mexico football, though, I don't know what the ceiling is in that program. It's just it's a basketball school, first, second, third, and football's like distant on the kind of the priority for that fan base.
All right, let's take another break here. We'll come back. We've got a quick Would You Rather. We're going to chat with Chris Smith here at the Doug Smith Mitsubishi in American Fork. We want you to come down and check out some of these vehicles. They have these Outlanders that are awesome, including the plug-in hybrids that are at an awesome price right now. They've got these Outlanders that are $398 down and $398 a month. These are almost $50,000 cars and on a lease to get you $398 a month. on top of the $398 down, and there's no hidden fees in there either. It's $398 after taxes, and then your payment's $398. So come down and check it out. We're going to take that break here. We'll come back. We'll have a Would You Rather coming up at 4 o'clock. Head coach of the Utah Hockey Club, Andre Torney, joining us, of course, as he does every Friday. And we get the coach, and we're going to see what this Utah Hockey Club is going to do over the next few days and see what they've improved on so much over the last few as well. Coach is always good to join us on a Friday. We've got more to break down. Riley Nelson, of course, who played for Bronco and played at Utah State and BYU. He's going to have some things to tell us also coming up later in the show on this move. And he met with the coaching staff during the season when they went to New Mexico to meet with a bunch of his old buddies. And I want to see what that conversation was like up in Logan before New Mexico took on Utah State. So we'll come back. We've got more to go. 97.5 the KSL Sports Zone.
Listen, everybody. Real-life hypotheticals to get your brain churning. As JJ and Alex ask, would you rather?
All right, welcome back. 97.5 EKSL Sports Zone. Alex Kirry, Mitch Harper sitting in for JJ today as we're down here at the Doug Smith Mitsubishi in American Fork. Let me see here. Who would you rather be today? Bronco getting the new gig at Utah State, or Jason Beck going into a massive – now, he did the Power 4 offensive coordinator thing for a second, but not really when he was at Syracuse. It was thrown in there kind of last minute, and it wasn't – this one feels like it could have some lasting staying power for him, and it could be the thing that kind of has him jump to the front of the line for some of these Power 4 head coaching jobs in the future.
No question. I think, though, if would you rather, I'd probably go Bronco just because that payday's nice. I mean, to be in a program where still the spotlight isn't quite like a bubble like BYU, like that's going to be a nice spot for Bronco to just kind of operate. And Logan's got enhanced expectations now. Like they're paying a premium.
Yep.
They want results.
How about 6 years too on the contract?
Bronco's not looking at jobs to say I'm going to retire. Like he wants to go win. I think this notion that he's just like. He's going to be passive and just kind of
ride off into the sunset from here.
No, he's going to go in here thinking he's going to go win something.
No, he could retire here.
Absolutely.
But it's going to be after 12 seasons if he gets him to a really, really good spot.
Utah State just got a coach that's won 140 games. I mean, this is the most decorated hire in Utah State history.
Yeah.
I mean,
crazy.
You're talking about getting a coach that's done a lot in college football. It's a big-time hire for Utah State.
I've sort of looked a little bit questioning of what some of the things are that Diana Sabo's been doing up there, but can't fault this at all. Not at all.
A much better move going to someone with local ties than going Midwest. This is going to have staying power.
For sure.
Stay with us, 97.5 the KSL Sports Zone.